Thank you, Danny and Liz. Let's look at Romans 2. Anything? It's good to see everybody. Henry and Linda asked about Conley. He's still in 269, sharing with apparently the same person as one of those double occupancy rooms. And he was doing much better today. His sister was there visiting with him today, that he was waiting on his lunch. And he seemed to be in good spirits and color in his face and much improved. So that's very good news. But keep him in your prayers. Appreciate those that have gone by to see him. If you get a chance, just stay just for a minute. Don't stay long. And he probably won't say much more than you have to know that he's not a big, strong conversationalist. At least he'll smile and he'd be glad to see you. Well, my gang, I think they've done their thing. I'm sure they all told me, and my wife told me what time they were coming back and all that. I think she has to be, I don't know, let's see, tomorrow's Martin Luther King's day. So she, I don't think they're staying the night though, so don't tell her that I didn't remember. All it'll do is make her hair fall out. Paul is kind of going to get two different kinds of things here in Romans 2, but he's really saying something to these particular readers. It's a particular group of people he's writing to. This letter is addressed to some specific. It's good for all Christians, and it's good for us, and it's very important in the writings of Paul. But he knows that he's addressing himself to people that he may or may not meet. He's going to Rome incarcerated, so I'm sure he'll see some of them during visiting hours or something like that. But ultimately, there is a theory that Paul does mention. You know, we talked about him saying, God wants me to go to Rome, and he didn't go to Rome. He went to Jerusalem. But he began telling people that he wanted to go to Spain. But it never does say, God told me that I was going to Spain. Now, if he had said, God revealed to me that I was supposed to go to Spain, then I would have went up. But there are, sure enough, churches and cathedrals in Spain that are purported to have been started by Paul the Apostle. Built a church everywhere. I don't know if he got to Spain. The Bible doesn't say anything about it if he did. But he's going to touch here. He's Jewish. And we're kind of at that point where Christianity was thought of as just an aberrant branch of Judaism. But it's going to begin to lose that flavoring because as the church begins its just enormous explosion throughout the known world at that time, began to lose a lot of its Jewishness, a lot of its Jewish flavor. Many of the people who were Jewish just passed away, just got old, died, and they were gone. And many times, since it wasn't salvation, it's not a generational thing. You're not a Christian because your daddy was a Christian, or your mama. So if someone passed away, it didn't mean that his children, grandchildren would follow in his footsteps of faith. The church doesn't grow too much generationally. I know that even our children and grandchildren and the young people that come into our families, into our church, they have to, at some point, be converted. They have to be saved. They have to come to know the Lord personally, if that's to happen. But in studying several things, and for some writing that I'm doing, but also for some of the preaching that I'm doing, I began to study the Jewish nation because this is, as I said, this is a place where Judaism, that people are beginning to will begin to think of Christianity. Today, generally, when they think of Christianity, they don't think of being Jewish at all. We Christians, we don't think of ourselves, though the Bible does describe us as children of Abraham, and we are really the true inheritors of the promise, those who have accepted Jesus as the Christ and the Messiah. Archie Bunker was completely nonplussed when someone told him that Jesus was a Jew. He just thought that was the worst thing that you could possibly say about somebody.
Yeah, but only on his mother's side.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't think of it. And there's a program, a regular cable program that says the Jewish Jesus. And their approach is if you can learn a lot about Judaism, and it'll tell you a lot about Jesus. And that'll only take you so far, because being a Jew was just a disguise that Jesus wore. It was just like a hat. That was his "Make America Great Again" hat. That was his disguise. Jesus is not Jewish. He really never was. He's only a human being. That was a human disguise he wore. He took upon flesh. He became God in our midst. But he's God. He is God. Well, I mentioned that, and I said I'm doing some research, that I began to, there seems to be a rise, oddly enough, in Germany and in Europe, and also in our own country, a rise of anti-Semitism. Well, there's more. People are beginning, it happens, it's almost like a cycle. I don't know, people are sitting around and say, what do you want to do? And I say, well, you want to hate the Jews? Okay. You know, like it's time to start doing that again. We get over it, and then we decide, well, let's just run around town. Listen, or think of something else we can do to the Jewish people. It amazes me today how Jewish American citizens can support the political causes and the political candidates that they do. I'm just astounded. We have the most pro-Israel president that has ever served in the White House in the history of the United States. And yet almost every Jewish person in the nation, in the United States, hates Donald Trump to a one. So go figure. Do whatever they want to do as Americans, whether it's wise or not. You know, it's amazing, and again, I keep up with politics, and I guess I could say that I'm a little amazed that it doesn't make it in my sermons more. You please forgive me and sometimes if I'm going overboard, say, hey, let's quit talking about what's going on out there in politics. But I don't know, it just seems like appropriate when it's talking about something like, to understand the roots of our faith. But you can find recordings of President Obama and President George Bush and President Clinton on television, on videotape, promising that they're going to move the U.S. consulate in Israel to Jerusalem. I mean, they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. Well, that's part of what I'm going to do. That's campaign promises. And then it says we're going to move the U.S. consulate from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is really the capital, in all practical sense, historic sense, of Jerusalem, of Israel. But none of them had any idea of doing it, any desire. They never intended to do it. Never wanted to, never thought, never tried. Never sit down and try to figure out a way. I mean, it's just something to say that would make a lot of people happy. And it did. And then that's the way a lot of things work in politics. I think. Just tell people what will make them happy, and then if all they want to be is happy, then you got them. You're their candidate. Sometimes it sounds like I'm down on happy. I don't know why anybody would want to be down on happy and say, well, he sounds like he's against happy. Well, happy is just not enough. Anyway, I started looking at Judaism, Hebrew nation, Hebrew children, they're called, children of Israel. And I began to find among conservative anthropologists the concept of race If you disagree with somebody today about anything, they're going to call you a racist. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Why are you racist? What are you, racist or something? But conservative anthropologists, they can talk with great sensibility today, saying the concept of race is manufactured. It's made out of whole cloth. There's really no such thing as race. Everybody in the world, every human being on the planet Earth that's ever been on the planet Earth is of the same species. We're all human beings. I watch too many of these true crime stories. And then Hulu and Netflix comes along, and there's a ton of them on there. You can just watch them till your eyeballs fall out. When they discover the remains of some deceased person out here in the woods somewhere or something, and there's been some matter of decay, and it has been out in the woods or out in the wild or buried in a shallow grave for a long time. Do you know, have you ever watched these shows? They don't come out and say, well, this was a black person, do they? Or this was a Chinese person. They don't say, well, we can tell that this was a Mexican. They don't. They can't. And even if they could pull DNA, they never will say, well, then he's got some African DNA going on there. A person from China or Africa or from South America, you can transplant one of my lungs into it if we're the right match, blood type match, and we can swap organs. We can donate blood to each other. Race is an amalgamation. It's a creation. There's really no such thing as the Hebrew race. Being racist is made up for us to argue about. You know, I see black people who have whiter skin than I do. Andy, is there something going on?
Where's your mic?
I'm sorry. I don't know. Here it is.
In the chair.
Thank you. All right. So this particular writer said, you know, you can adopt Judaism. You can become a Jew. Well, that doesn't mean that you're Jewish, that you're related, that you became a Jew because your mom and daddy were Jewish. And it doesn't mean that you're a member or a citizen of the nation of Israel. You just picked up a religion. So in one sense, Judaism is different than being a Jew. If you can follow Judaism, you can become a Jew in the sense of following what Jews believe. Not everybody who lives in the nation of Israel is Jewish. Now, when they talk about Semitism or anti-Semitism, do you remember that that's what that comes from is that when God brought the flood, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The people who, that means that if, you see, first of all, there was Adam and Eve. So everybody that's ever been born is kin to Adam and Eve somehow or another. And then God brought the flood, and everybody in the whole world is kin to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Not just one or the other, but all of them. Because Shem is related to Ham, and Ham is related to Japheth, and Japheth is, like that. So we're all related. We're all people. Shem are the Shemites. And anti-Semitism comes, it's actually the letter that looks like a W in Hebrew can be, if you put a dot over this one, it's called a sheen. If you put the dot over this leg, it's a seen, sheen or seen. So it's anti-Shemitism or anti-Semitism. But Shem, the son of Noah, the Semites came, of the people who dwelt, who were in Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham was a Semite. All right, now, you'd find this out if you went over to Israel. It seems to be, I began to notice that, you see, Israel today is split up between Palestinians or Arabs and Jews. And when you're going from one end to the other to Israel, you have to go through checkpoints, and they have barbed wire fences and walls of every kind. And believe me, they work. I never looked at one because they usually have two fences with razor wire on top, and they run big Doberman Pinschers and German Shepherds down the middle of it all the time. I never looked at that and say, I'd like to try to climb that and see if I can get over. It never entered my mind. And then people standing all over the place with Uzis and guns of every kind. See, like a 13, 14-year-old boy look at you like, yeah, let's go ahead, let's move real quick. I'll shoot you deader than a hammer. You know, you're going around, remember I told you the story a long time ago about Brother Donnell looking at some Palestinian kids and saying shalom to them when they don't say shalom. They're not of that thread. They say salam, which is Arabic for shalom. And they can tell each other, and I began to look at them. And there are ways really that Palestinians dress, and of course they're speaking Arabic, and they wear a certain kind of jewelry and whatnot, and that's how they tell, because I began to look at them. Do you know who the very first Jewish person was, who was the very first of the children of Israel, who God called out? Who was that?
Abraham.
It was Abraham. All right, so Abraham was the father of all the Jews. Okay, who's the father of all the Arabs? Abraham.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Abraham.
Same guy.
Same guy. He had a son named Ishmael. As a matter of fact, Ishmael was born before Isaac was born.
Right.
So all those people over there that don't like each other and hate each other, want to kill each other, are kin to each other, they're all the same. They're not the Palestinian race or the Arabic race and the Jewish race. We've created all that so we'll have something to hate each other about. Well, let's finish this. Let's do this. Thou art therefore inexcusable, O man, whoever you are, that judges. In other words, when you look at people and say, you're a sinner, and you're a sinner, and you're a sinner, he's already established something he's going to say very clearly in chapter 3. We've all sinned. So if you're judging people, listen to what he says. For wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself. For thou that judgest dost the same things. These politicians are getting where they hate social media. Because they'll come out and say, building a wall is immoral. And then somebody will start playing the video when just 2 years ago they were saying, we need a wall down there. Or they're separating children from their parents. Yeah, so has every other president in the last 30 years, or 50 or 60. He's saying, y'all are judging each other and negative, and so y'all do the same thing. But we are sure that the judgment of God is according to truth against them which commit such things. He says the only thing you really count on is that God knows the truth. And you think this, oh man, you that judge them which do such things, and you do the same, do you think that you're going to escape the judgment of God? Where are you going? Or despisest thou the riches of his goodness and forbearance and long-suffering, not knowing that the goodness of God leads thee to repentance? I hate it when God saves somebody or when God forgives somebody. Or when someone says, well, I'm a different person now, I met the Lord. He says, well, it's that same goodness of God that led you to repentance. But after your hardness and impenitent heart treasures up yourself wrath against the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. He says, your day is coming, he said, if that's your attitude, who will render to every man according to his deeds. To them who by patient continuance and well-doing seek for the glory and honor of immortality, eternal life. Take 8 up at the top there, Andy. Thank you. But unto them that are contentious and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation and wrath is what they're going to get. Tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil, of the Jew first and also to the Gentile. Remember he said in Romans 1:16, he says, salvation to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. And here he says, tribulation and anguish upon the Jew first and the Gentile. But glory, honor, and peace to every man that works good, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. There's no respect of persons with God. For as many as have sinned without the law shall also perish without the law. And as many have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. For not the hearers of the law are the just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. In other words, nobody. Nobody's going to be justified by the law. Because it's not because you went to the temple and heard the law, or because you went to the synagogue and they read the law to you and you heard it. He says, you have to do the law before it ever does any good. And he says, you didn't do the law. But when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are law unto themselves. He says, you think this would be something new. He says there are lost people out there in the world that never heard of Moses, and they're doing things. They're not killing people or stealing or committing adultery. They're doing the things that are there. He says they don't have the law, and yet they're keeping the law. They're a law unto themselves. Which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness in their thoughts. The meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. In the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. Behold, you're called a Jew. He says, if in fact, and he's writing to people who, since the church probably started a synagogue, that many of them, probably still at that time, most of them were still Jewish. But he is mentioning as often as possible to the Jew first and also to the Greek, or to the Jew and to the Gentile. So the church that he's writing to is also many Gentiles. He says, you're called a Jew, you rest in the law, and you make your boast of God. He says, I'm a Jew. I'm one of the chosen people. I'm one of the chosen, selected people. And know his will and approve of the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. He says, I know what the Bible says. I know what God's will is. Most Jews do and did. And you're confident that you yourself are a guide of the blind and a light of them which are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish and a teacher of babes, which has from the form of knowledge and the truth of the law. You therefore, which teach another, teachest not thyself. You that preach a man should not steal, do you steal? You say a man should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You that abhorrest idols, do you commit sacrilege? You make your boast of the law, though breaking the law, and you dishonor God. If for the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles through you, as it is written, for circumcision very profiteth if you keep the law. But if you be a breaker of the law, the circumcision is made uncircumcision. So he started out by talking about being a Jew. And then he moves into, he said, let's just look at one particular law. And probably one of the most significant laws of Judaism, or what they felt like was one of their defining laws, was the laws of circumcision. It's amazing that one of the cornerstone ceremonies of Judaism, and it had nothing to do with half of their nation. Women. Women can't be circumcised. So he's zoning in right here. He says, if you believe your ticket or the thing that puts you at the top of the pile is being Jewish, he said, if you keep the law, then circumcision works for you. But he says, if you disobey the law, if you're a lawbreaker, circumcision becomes uncircumcision. A lot of people don't understand that it is their prayers that God hates. It is their church attendance that angers God. It is the things that they do. You read the book of Isaiah chapter 1. He says, your new moons and your Sabbaths, your offerings and your tithes. And he said, all the things you do as an act of religion, he says, they stink to me. He says, I hate them. You think just doing ordinary, normal, sinful things is what makes God happy? Look at Jesus. Jesus looked at the Pharisees and he said, you that make broad your phylacteries. Phylactery was a little band they wore around their forehead, around their wrist. It had scriptures in it. They'd just be standing around. If they weren't doing anything, they'd just whip out a verse of the Word of God. They'd read it, put it back. Jesus said, that makes God so mad. He said, he's going to just burn you to the ground. All of you. He says, the way you pray, he said, you get out and pray to be seen of people. He says, that's really what, and so he instructed his disciples. He says, they're just a bunch of whited sepulchres, he said, they're just full of dead men's bones. That's what he's talking about here. Your circumcision has become uncircumcision. That's when God looks at it and says, I know that when that was done, it was done to connect him to the covenant, but he says, that doesn't cut any, pardon the expression, doesn't cut any space with me. And shall not uncircumcision which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law? For he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. All right, so there are two things he talks about. He's starting, he said, okay, everybody's sinned. And we're all sinners. And then he starts in chapter 2 here of Romans saying, if you believe because you're a particular religious kind of person, you're Jewish. So I'm writing a letter to you about salvation. And being Jewish has nothing whatsoever to do in the eyes of God with being saved. He's saying God doesn't give you a star by your name, or you don't get any extra points for being Jewish. He says you just need to know that. A lot of you are Jewish. And he says, let me just pick just one thing as an example. He says, somebody's going to rise up on Judgment Day and you're going to say to God, but God, I'm circumcised. Listen for a minute to see exactly how stupid that sounds. That you feel like that's because you didn't even do that. You see, more than likely, on the 8th day of your life into the world, your parents took you to the temple or to the synagogue and the rabbi circumcised. It's not something you said, yeah, little baby, would you like to be circumcised? And the little baby would probably say, I'm really not all that excited about it. I'm just to be honest with you. The baby's 8 years old. He don't know. That's a good time to grab hold of him and circumcise him, I guess. Because if he was about 16 and you said, son, we used to do that when years ago people would look at their young people in their church and in their family, they'd look over at them during the invitation and say, do you think it's about time you joined the church? I think so, Daddy. So a lot of people joined the church and never got saved. Look at that same teenage boy and say, hello, son. I said, do you think it's about time you got circumcised? Daddy, I'm really not convicted about that. I don't feel the Spirit moving me about that. All right, now, let me close with this. He's really writing this letter to a diverse group of people. He does refer to those other people here, but he's starting out. And he's going to address this all through Romans in various places. All right? This religion that you're being exposed to, or that this thing about the Messiah and about Jesus, You need to know a little bit about Abraham and about Judaism. You do. You got to know the history. You got to kind of know if you want to know the background, this is the background. But all of that were just steps on how to get to Jesus, because he says Jesus is the only one who can save you. Jesus is the only one who can pay for your sins. Jesus is the only one that everything in the gospel is about Jesus. So it's not about Judaism or being Jewish. It's not about circumcision. All right, now, let me close with this. This is a really good trick question. This is probably one of the best trick questions I've ever asked. You get this, boy, I'm just going to pour blue stars all over you. He is implying something to the people who are reading this letter who are Gentiles. The thing about it is there's something that they could say, those people, not the Jewish people, the Gentiles that are reading this letter could say something and make a claim that is far more powerful than I'm a Jew. And as a matter of fact, Paul himself had used that statement as a ploy to get himself out of trouble once or twice. There is something that those people could say that was far more powerful and far more important and far more significant than standing up and saying, I'm a Jew, so therefore I've got some clout with God. The other people who are Christians who are reading this letter, what could they say? I'm a Roman.
I'm a citizen.
I need to take you out to eat, Gene. I'm a Roman. Remember that time they was strapping Paul up, they was getting ready to, they was popping the razor strap and everything and loosening it up. Remember what Paul said? He said, I'm a Roman. And the guy went, what? He said, I bought my Roman citizenship. And Paul said, I'm Roman born. He says, I'll be right back. And he went over to his boss and he said, man, I'm just about to whoop that fella. Said he was a Roman. And they probably had people say that, going to be in prison ministry. You know what everybody in prison ministry says? Yeah, I'm innocent. Yes. I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I'm just here. I was framed. Everybody in prison is innocent. That's a shame. You know who believes them? The Democrats. They're going to let them all out. They believe that. Yeah, I'm innocent. Man. And something like that was easy for them, even though they didn't have computers and they didn't have cards and things. It was easy to find out. I was born in Tarsus. And everybody is born in Tarsus. That's where our ridiculous birth citizenship comes from. Born in Tarsus, you're a Roman citizen. You don't have to buy it. You're free. You're born free. They're about to whoop him. Man, that's about to get in some serious trouble. And the thing about it is, man, the Roman emperor was a god. He demanded to be worshipped as a god. And here are these Jews in this church, and they're saying, well, I'm a Jew. I've been circumcised. One say, that ain't nothing. I'm a Roman. That beats your hand of cards going north and south. He said, man, I'm a Roman. That's that's pretty important stuff, because you go anywhere in the whole world, the known world at that time, you just walk into the market, you just walk into a military base. Let me tell you something. If you ever get to travel overseas, you get to go to Europe or something like that, and you get into some kind of trouble, you know where you need to run, you know where you need to go?
Your embassy.
Yeah, go to the U.S. Embassy. Now, go to the U.S. Embassy. Do you know what's peculiar about that property with the U.S. Embassy building sit on?
American soil.
It's American soil. Man, it's just like being in Alabama, except they talk different. Maybe. Might have Gomer Garden Gate. Who knows? But man, when you go on there, you get in through the gate. If they come in there to get you, do you know what could happen? You could start a war. And the people that know say, oh, I believe I could shoot him from here. He said, man, you dummy. He's on American soil now. We got to turn around and go away. He's home free. He's in Sweet Home, Alabama, man. He's on American soil. you could go anywhere in the whole known world at that time, and they'd say, man, what are you doing here? We don't serve your kind here. You say, I'm a Roman. Oh, well, sit right here. Let me get you a glass of tea. You know what? I've come to a conclusion. Even if Paul wasn't that smart, or he wasn't intending to imply that, I really do believe the Holy Spirit, I know he's that smart, and I believe that I see it here because they needed to know too that even bragging about being a Roman didn't cut any clout with God. So it's not going to get you anywhere. You don't get any credit with God for being a Roman. You can't throw that around. Paul could say, there was a few times that instead of trusting in Jesus, I told him I was a Roman, but it was in a moment of weakness. They were just about to whip me with a razor strap. And my religion just went completely out the door. I always thought if I stand there, I'd say, shame on you, man. He said, you want to take my whooping for me? I said, no, man, I'm a Roman too. I'm a U.S. citizen. The thing about it is, if you travel a lot, you have to be careful. Because a lot of people in the world, just a whole lot of people in the world don't like U.S. citizens. A lot of them moved here, you know, they're here now. Because everywhere we go, everywhere a U.S. citizen go, you know what we've done for them? We've liberated them. We've set them free. We've built their cities back. We've killed their tyrants and their dictators. We've routed the evil and wickedness. So when U.S. citizens go abroad, we brag about being a U.S. citizen. Well, I'm American, man. I'm American. How come y'all can't speak American? We expect everybody in the whole world to speak English. They don't. We get mad at them. What's wrong with you? You can't speak American? And they think we're arrogant, and we are. I'm proud to be an American. I'm one of the. I try not to be arrogant, but I can see myself I've been in a lot of Arab countries. If someone grabbed a hold of me and started whipping up on me or kidnapped me or something like that, even if I wasn't on hallowed ground, I'd be tempted to look up at them and say, man, I don't think there's anything I can say to keep you from beating me, but in case you just didn't know it, I'm a U.S. citizen, and just wanted to say that might even make you even madder. There's one thing else I wanted to tell you. You hit like a girl, and, you know, so that probably helped things along. Well, this is just chapter 2. He's fixing to jump into chapter 3, and he's going to get right down to the last tacks. And he said, you know, I want to let y'all know, there's a lot of things that y'all are, and then a lot of things y'all think y'all are, and things you think you did and you didn't do. And he said, let's kind of clear the air before we even get started. None of that matters anymore. And listen, I get it. Man, you sacrifice your best bullock or one of your prized sheep or lambs or ewes, you kind of feel like, all right, I feel better already. And the Old Testament ceremonial and sacrificial law kind of gave the impression that it was what you did that made God happy. But what God was trying to do all along was saying, you know, this is all symbolic, and it had to do with your relationship with me. And it really didn't become focused and clarified until Jesus came and became the Lamb of God, became the sacrifice, became the high priest, spilled his blood, and then all of it says, he said, oh, do you get it now? And so many didn't. They still wanted to keep on sacrificing. As a matter of fact, there's a group of Christians right now that they believe one day that people of God are going to start sacrificing animals again at the temple. They're going to rebuild the temple and they're going to start animal sacrificing. It's never going to happen, in my opinion. I don't think, my interpretation. I don't think. All right, so I think that there are things in our lives, maybe who we're related to or what our name is, we still tease about it, talk about it. Our dad used to walk into places, he'd say, I'm John Bain. I think it's a car dealer thing, jail probably does it. He said, I'm J.L. Sanders, and they say, oh, come in, Mr. Sanders. You know, like he's somebody. I'm John Bain. And it hasn't happened in a long, long time. But about 20 or 30 years ago, you could walk into almost any place around in town and tell them who you were. And I wasn't calling myself John Bain then. I'm just saying, I'm Dennis Bain. They'd say, "Are you related to John Bain?" I'd say, "Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am." And I could go a lot of places. I've talked to you about buying that old Toyota. Well, I bought that Toyota for just almost sticker price. Daddy, I didn't pay dealer's prep. I didn't. Nobody made any commission on that car. And that's what your daddy can do. Just walk in there and he says, "I'm going to buy my son's first car, and I either want you to give it to him for nothing, or I want to buy it for nearly nothing." I think I spent a little over $4,000 for that car. A little four-cylinder Toyota Corolla. Looks like a box. It just squares a box. And just as solid as a rock. I hardly ever had to do anything to it. 350,000 miles. I'd still be driving it today if I hadn't pulled out from that car. Well, I'm kin to John Bain, but that doesn't cut any snuff with God. And we ought to be proud of things, I guess, in certain ways. Not the bad kind of pride. But all will say, look, what I'm telling you about, what I'm about to tell you about, that have anything to do with how Roman you are, how Jewish you are, or how many times you've been circumcised. You know, it's about Jesus. And that's all. All right? Well, folks, go home. Get by the fire. Throw in the law.